All right, welcome to another edition of Grown Folks Business on a wonderful Thursday evening. I'm kind of in a good state of like frame of mind right now. It's been a long day, but it's been a while since we've had two women like of this caliber. I'll say because Julia's a mainstay. She's always here and she's sharing space with Greg, but we got Lisa and Vanessa joining us this evening, and Vanessa's fairly new to the space, so that's another reason I'm a little happy. And Lisa, you like you're a piece of the puzzle that just fits. So I'm glad you were able to get here this evening as normal. Bob, good to have you as always. Uh, Tonight's one of those topics that I kind of wax philosophical on, and we covered things of this nature in this space over these many shows. And this is one that I think it just it reiterates or further confirms what I think is important to us as a whole and as a collective, and that's doing the best we can with what we have, and being at points consciously considerate of others and stuff of that nature. So tonight's show is titled "Some Assembly Required." What makes a good person? So we're literally going to have a discussion, uh, kind of in the realm of Frankenstein or the Bride of Frankenstein. You know, what's the best parts to use to create this thing so that we can say it's alive? What are the best parts that assemble a good person? Again, I've covered a lot of things in the space in regards to the human condition and wrestling with what it is to be conscious and to be socially engaged and considerate of the whole and not just the self. So we're doing that again, but I think in a different way. Uh, think about the people that you know that you consider good. I know when I'm talking about certain people, uh, a number of them in this space, one of the descriptive terms that I use is that's good people. I think that sums it up a lot of times if you're having a conversation and somebody say, you know, such and such. And if the first thing the thought comes to your mind is like, that's good people there. That's good people. Like that's some country types sounding stuff, but it's an actuality. I say, man, that's good people, or that's my people. So it's all indicative of that being a person that's worth knowing. Um, so again, some assembly required. So what makes a good person? It's not always just the package comes complete. We're all a work in progress. And I want that to be a part of this discussion also. So that assembly can still be going on. And some of those parts that don't fit might need to be discarded and put it aside and, find a new one. So we're going to talk about self in this conversation also. Um, so I'll begin with what the prompt it is. I'm trying to work on my prompting because Jay, who isn't here tonight, he was like, sometimes you make us think too hard, and we ain't clear. So this one was a pretty clear one, I think. What makes a good person? So Lisa, I'm gonna start with you. If you have ideas around this, and as we often do, I'm sure you're gonna get to one of the questions without me getting to it first. But um, just in a general sense, and I really want to unpack this. So whatever comes to mind as we process this thing, what makes a good person in your mind?
Um, the subjective nature of that question. Um, so I'm the subject. So I'm going to give you my analysis on what I think is a good person for me to engage with. Someone who is not perfect, but yet has enough compassion and introspection to assess their relationship with others. So and continuing to have authentic motives. So when people's motives are not pure, I think that is a piece that alters whether I uh, judge them as good or bad. Because if someone's motive is selfish, self-indulgent, without respect of others' um, the impact on others, then that's a bad that makes for a bad, I hate to say bad person, because I'm a believer, right? So as a believer in God, what I subscribe to is that the enemy can use and will use each of us. Okay. And if we are not protected, if we are not being guided by the goodness from God, then we will be used by the devil to hurt someone else. But some people just veer so far away from wanting to accept goodness that other people end up being victimized. So since it is good or bad person, then I'm going to say the bad person is allowing themselves to be used over and over without the consideration of the damage that they're doing.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to come back to some of that. I think you started a good stream of thought, and it's not finished. There's way more to unpack in just that space. Um, the parts of this assembly, and there's Jay. Good to see you, man. Um, did you have to run to the computer? Took that deep breath. Uh, I already know you got the prompt. I told everybody before you got here, this prompt was for you in terms of the simplicity and not a lot to have to piece together. This was a straightforward one, but I appreciate you getting here. Yeah, Lisa, I concur with authenticity being a key component in the assembly of a good person, and inauthenticity being a part you leave out. So yeah, I like where you were headed with that. And I know there was more to that stream of thought. Uh, I throw in as a critical components, patience. Of course, one of my favorite words is consideration. People hear me say that a lot. I get some jovial jabs for saying consideration a lot. Everybody knows I got those 3 C's: consideration, cooperation, and communication. So, and then there's another one I always forget. But yeah, I think consideration. I think patience. Uh, but you said something inside of this, right? And we're going to get to that before we leap over all the sharks and frogs in the water. We're all a work in progress. And you said, nobody's perfect. And that's absolutely the case. So good person is definitely subjective and definitely relative to what you can require in your mind for that to be something that gets checked off. But we often can disappoint and fail too. And does that just derail all of the goodness that we're trying to give out to the world? That's something to be wrestled with. So Vanessa, because I do respect and love to have women in space, I'm gonna be calling on y'all first probably most of the time. So I'm glad you guys are here. What is the things that make someone a good person in your mind?
Okay. Well, you guys bear with me. I love the way that, I'm sorry, is it Lisa? I can't read on my computer. That she came at this, from a spiritual perspective, a very introspective kind of look at it. And I guess how I came at it was just a little bit different, but, I know that's what this space allows, just some creativity and diversity in terms of how we look at certain things. And I guess that's why I enjoy the space so much. But when I look at, or when the question or the prompt came up, what constitutes a good person, I kind of went back to my teacher mindset, and I started to think, okay, so good, obviously that's an adjective, and it describes or having the qualities required to fulfill a certain role. Okay, it's so something to be desired or approved. So I get that, and I started to ponder and think about it. But then I get down to the noun form, which that which is morally right or righteousness, the benefit or advantage of someone or something. And so when I got there, I kind of got stumped, because all of a sudden I was having a kind of a bypass in this head of mine, because for me, the idea of a good person or that adjective, that which is desired or approved by someone, that seems to set up, this quandary of, anything can be deemed good, because we all know that just because someone has the approval or something that's desired, and all of a sudden, I'm thinking to myself, that's not necessarily good. And so, I had to fall back to the noun form. So I guess I say all that to say this. For me, to say that someone is good, or what constitutes a good person, for me, it says that there must be an ascribed standard. In other words, if you are certainly a person of faith, then your standard of good perhaps is that which is outlined in your word or in your Bible or what have you. And so, when I started thinking about what constitutes a good person, the idea that there must be a standard that one must incorporate, and think outside of their own selves, for the betterment, the collective betterment of one's own self, one's own interest, or perceived importance or benefit. And so for me, that is, good. And again, that standard has to be present in order for that person to be good, because, there is no shortage of evidence every day that, people have ideas and thoughts, and they engage in behaviors that one section or another may be considered, that's good or that's favorable. And, perhaps the other part of the country may be horrified at that. And so, that's, I guess, what comes to mind. So what makes a good person for me is a person that has, or there's an understanding that this, as you say, is always a work in progress. That goodness is not a constant, that it is forever evolving, and that it adjusts, it adapts, and responds to the human condition. And so, that for me constitutes a good person, that has those qualities, and understands and has the ability to see that this is in many ways something that is not static or stoic, but something that evolves almost, to the point that, I would say it, metaphorically, it's something that's living, a goodness.
Great. So awesome. I truly appreciate your contribution to the space. Yeah, this is a subjective question, as most of these are. I like to find alignment, right? And I think that's the human part of me that, I think of something and I get to share it in this wonderful area of grown folks business. And at points I find alignment, but at points I get to get somebody else's processing of something that I thought of that goes in a different direction. And I'm so pleasantly surprised. And Vanessa, you introduced a concept in this question that is wholly considered of what is good. You require good to be defined in your processing of the question, to be better defined. I appreciate that, and I like how you just kind of broke that down. And yeah, the what is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Good is in that little saying, and that
Indeed.
is very much applicable, right? Very much
Indeed.
applicable. So what's really good if you still end up in a bad place? So that needs to be wrestled with. I appreciate it. Did you want to add something before?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you, Bob. Because somebody got here late, they don't get to go to the end. So Bob.
Dwayne be the sweeper.
Yeah, he's the sweeper, man. He's the cleanup man. So Bob, tell me what makes a good person? What assembly pieces are required?
Yeah, so and I appreciate Vanessa's clarification of the definition that she was using as the basis for her comments, because I think that's absolutely critical. One of the things I was thinking about is, a good person and the person we like are maybe two very different people. Just because a person is a good person doesn't mean we like them. We may be, they may really agonize us. Good doesn't mean popular. Good doesn't mean, oh, they're successful in business. They're successful in their work. That doesn't make them a good person. And, you know, I think good has to include, you say consideration, I would say an outward orientation, an external orientation. That means not selfish. That means giving. That means loving. That means not taking. That means giving. That means loving. Not seeking, not necessarily seeking love, but willing to give love and be oriented again out of yourself into other people. You know, some people that are good people are well intended, but they don't have good results. It doesn't mean they're not good people if they are motivated in good ways and for good reason. You know, I'm a results oriented guy, so I like people that achieve results. I like authenticity. Some people aren't comfortable being authentic, but they're comfortable being good. They're comfortable being doing for others and being that kind of person. So it's a more complex question, I think, than it looks like on its face. You know, good and what I personally value in other people are two different things. Like I said to begin with, good and what makes somebody popular or makes somebody likable are two different things. I like to think, and for me, good requires intentionality. Good requires, but for some people, it's more instinctive. And they operate as good people because it's just more instinctive for them to be that than it is to be thoughtful and intentional about that. So again, it's a more complicated question than it appears on its face. I think that we all are reared or raised, or whatever word you want to use, a particular way. And to use a term that you and I are both familiar with, Belton, we get domesticated. We get domesticated through that process. But we get domesticated based upon somebody else's sense of who we ought to be or become, or what values or actions or whatnot we need to ascribe to. I think that there's a point at which we have to decide we're going to figure ourselves out and we're going to be who we intend to be. And that can be to choose to be good, or it can be to choose to be something else. But you're constructed to your prompt about some assembly required. You are at least constructing yourself, and you are at least making decisions about who you are going to be. And hopefully that includes good intention. Hopefully that includes consideration. Hopefully that includes respect. Hopefully that includes you not being the center of the universe and recognizing that something else is. So that's a long answer to a arguably simple question, but
no, I appreciate you observing the intended complexity. That's what the discussion has got to be moved by. So I greatly appreciate you recognizing that. And man, so much of what you said, aligns with a lot of things that I've already discussed in the space, as I said before. One of my favorite sayings is that it's never too late to be who you thought you were. So as long as you're here, and no matter what stage in time that you really had desires to be a certain type of individual, hopefully a good one, it's never too late to start that process, or to finish that, to complete that process as best you can. I do enjoy the observations that you made, Bob, in terms of prioritizing the collective over the individual. I think that is an indicator of a good person. And there's a recognition in that world of people who might be good and might be trying. Everybody's not built for it. The first thing that I thought of, and Vanessa, I think you were mentioning some energies around your teaching career. Some teachers had the best intentions, but they wasn't built to be in a room full of bad kids or strong-willed, strong-minded young people who would challenge and push back and run them out the classroom. Some substitutes didn't make it. and they might have been the best people ever. Go ahead, Bob. You unmuted yourself.
Yeah, just one additional comment to make is that people that we perceive as nice aren't necessarily good.
Absolutely. The lady, the cookie lady down the street, that when we were kids, she might have been putting something in them cookies, but that's neither here nor there. She was great to us as far as I know. Nothing happened to me. Jay, your turn, bro. I'm glad you got here. You got the prompt, some assembly required. What are the pieces and components that you think are necessary to make a good person?
First of all, good afternoon. Good evening, y'all. I'm traveling this week, and I hate to travel. So that's my other problem. I don't feel like myself. I feel like I'm everywhere. I saw a text message, saw an email, even saw an email from Bob, and I'm like, I ain't respond to nothing. But see, and that's what make me a bad person right now. But no, I think good is an entrapment of respectability. And that's funny. I feel like my inner Meryl is coming out right now because we've had so many conversations around this. Because good is never something the individual can claim. Only somebody else can describe them as good. And so that sucks because you will always be in prison to somebody else's opinion of you. And so that's why that good. And then Bob was in my brain because a lot of times people confuse nice and kind. And nice is very respectability focused. And it's all these other people, oh, they're so nice, they're so good, they're so all of these things. But they could, like you say, be a very evil person. Or they could be a person that is not well intended. It's so many different things that happens with good. And I try to stay away from descriptors that are left in somebody else's hands. And good is definitely one of them, where it'll be a cycle where you will never be, quote unquote, good enough because someone is always going to poke fun or mismanage the good that is truly within you. I'm gonna stop there.
No, awesome observation once again. So the one person I feel that received this prompt in the way that I envisioned it is Lisa, because she mentioned the subjective element forthright in her observation. It is required in this space that I'm desiring to wrestle with the prompt for you to share what you think assembles a good person. And I love this because we end up blurring and painting outside the lines, and we get to discuss what good actually is, because I need that. Vanessa needs that to be defined before she can delve into the prompt. Bob is adhering to some ideas around basically a functional individual in society. And that's just for me to just rip away all of the other stuff. Somebody who's actually for the greater good. As good is already in there, right? So they have to be a decent human being at points, and hopefully a good person. And Jay doing what he doing to a degree, he breaking down the whole dynamic of the idea of understanding that you can't just assign this to somebody because somebody else might not. And then somebody else comes along and says, well, they all right. So does that mean, which way is that skewing? What percentage is that taking you? Go ahead, Jay.
Especially in the race relations area, I have to say that whenever something is brought out and saying, hey, that is racist or that is culturally insensitive, I'm a good person. Who told you you were good? And why do you think that that's going to be a blanket for everything? But it does trap people into thinking once someone labels me as good, that means everything that I do will be good moving forward. And that's like a fallback for everyone. And you hear people in their defense, he was a good person when he just shot up a whole school. They always throw that good out there like that is something that will wipe someone's slate clean, and it also tends to give that person a false narrative of who they truly are. That's all.
Nah, welcome in. I'm not a good person when I'm driving. I know that. I got road rage. It's terrible. I remember one time I almost blew up at one of my middle school teachers. I was at a drive-through or something. I'm like, yeah, and then I get up beside him, I'm like, oops, it's Mr. Wilson. Sorry, but yeah, catch me at that time. I'm probably not a good person, but I like to think I am. But I also am aware as Jay is. It is not as beholden upon me to think those thoughts. It is literally the one time that you truly have to give it away and allow for that to be something that hopefully enough of a high percentage of people assign to you. And I can't count the drivers I encounter on the road because they wouldn't know I was a good person. So yeah, this is what I'm here for. Lisa, I'm gonna start back with you, and then I'm going to Vanessa, and we'll figure out Jay and Bob and along the way. But Lisa, I finish unpacking if you like, because you were on a track of something I wanted to hear. But I also want to throw in this question. How do you know when you're in the presence or in proximity to a good person? And I'll throw this out there on top of it. I use the word proximity because you do not have to actually be physically present. I mean, if you access them through literature, or I want it to be a real person, not a fictional one, but if it's something you read a biography and you get something from it, and in your eyes it makes them a good person, you can include that. Not saying you have to, but that's one, the proximity element can be applied. Somebody you watch on TV, somebody you see giving a sermon on YouTube. It doesn't matter. How do you know when you're in the presence or in the proximity of a good person?
So again, I'm gonna go to this spirituality or essence and aura piece, because everybody knows I love babies. I just love kids, and I think they are the most authentic entity that we can have. So the trusting nature of that innate response from children, that if they get with some people, their bodies react and they cry or they squirm. It's the energy that they're picking up. Now, I just trust that because they don't have the ability to have impure motives, right? But it could be. So I've told my daughter this before. I know that my daughter is a genuinely kind person. She doesn't have malicious thoughts and ideas because I've known her for a while. But there has been babies that have not responded to her in a positive manner. So what I've noticed, because I like to study people, I people watch, is that her energy is nervous energy. And children aren't comfortable with that. If you're not confident, children can sense you're not confident that you're going to care for them. And I think when people gave me the tag of a baby whisperer, I have always been confident that I just love kids enough that I'm not going to purposefully hurt them. So to me, that's when I feel comfortable in spaces if I can automatically sense that confidence that someone is not going to purposefully hurt me. That don't mean you're not going to hurt me. So that's, to me, the determiner of good versus bad, because I can also sense at times, no, I can tell they mean me no good, whether I read between some lines, whether I watch some body language or feel the energy. And I have been in the presence of people who I've had a physical response, and I just believe in that. So there's people where I've been inviting to some spaces, and I've told them the time it starts. And then they're like, well, what time are you going to be there? I usually try to arrive places a half hour early, if it's like a big space or if I'm presenting or whatever. And I have started telling people, I want to put my energy in the room first, because it's harder to go in and thwart the negative energy. So if I go and inhabit the space and find my happy place, I feel more empowered. And I take a position of presence and authority in my pure motives. And I will make a beeline away from energy that I am not trusting of the motive. Now, whether it's right or wrong, I'm going to go back to my my faith, is that even Paul in the Bible said that every day he has to die to his flesh. as long as we walk this earth, we are all going to do things that's going to hurt people. And if any of us think we're perfect, then we've already lost. But that doesn't mean that I just dismiss that I hurt you, Jay Dwayne. I could have said something about your shirt that I didn't know you would take personal. But if I don't acknowledge that what I did, after I see a response, a pain response from you, or after you acknowledge it, if I don't acknowledge that I wasn't trying to hurt you, I didn't mean to hurt you, and I'm sorry you were hurt, that still might not take away the fact that that blue and pink don't go together good. But that's what but it does, right? I'm just giving that as an example. But that's how I subjectively decide who I'll engage with. Now, that type of other people may be cool with people being inauthentic. So that's who they need to mess around with. But for me, that's not who I mess around with, because also we've all had experiences, and certain people may trigger your pain body response. You may have a trauma response from engaging with someone who is their authentic self. And it's perfectly fine. You're just not my person to engage with.
Yeah, I like the baby aspect of things. Kids love me. Babies do. I don't know why, but they do. I had a conversation with one the other day in a restaurant. He was just like looking at me like, "Yeah, man, I get it too. Fools and babies." So I guess I'm the fool.
Always trust a kid.
Yeah, they got good antenna. They got good antenna. Yeah, I think another thing to introduce into that is that protective aspect, Lisa, the safety protection that you kind of can sense in that when you're speaking about it from the energy perspective. There's a comfort that can exist with certain people, and that gives you some ideas that lean towards knowing you're in proximity or in the presence of somebody that might be good, that has a high potential of being good. Something else that you alluded to was discernment, knowing when you're not. I think that's critically important. Deciding whether you want to continue to expend energy to figure that out, or do you want to just go with that knower that's telling you to get the heck on. So yeah, but that's coming to you next. So how do you know when you're in the presence or in the proximity of a good person?
I think very much the same way, in the sense that I like to think that my spiritual sense is something that I rely on throughout my life. I was taught long time ago, it's not your gut, it's not the willies, but it's your spiritual connection to your high power. And in my case, certainly I believe that's, my Lord and Savior. And so for me, it's, I'm not saying or suggesting that, I know by virtue of, an act or two, what someone's heart saying. But there's an old saying that we have in our church is that, I may not be able to judge the tree, but I can certainly judge the fruit. And so if a person's spirit, if their aura, if their actions, if their whatever is antithetical to my standard, then I know that goodness is not there. You can dress it up, you can call it what you want. Like I said, people have differences of opinion. And just because, in the adjective form, something may be desired by some, does not, for me, make that good. And so it goes back to me to what the standard is. And the standard says that, when a person is ascribing to that standard, they incorporate the betterment for the collective. It extends beyond itself. It's its own interest, its own perceived importance, its own benefit. In other words, goodness, just like love, is not selfish. And so when actions or behaviors or a spirit or aura is all about individuality, then for me, that says that is not goodness. Despite whatever the actions may say, despite whatever the lips may say, that is not goodness. And so by the same token, I believe that I am in the space of goodness, or that I'm experiencing that when, not because someone says something, but because I can feel and appreciate and I feel a sense of oneness with someone's spirits. And so, for me, that, is that thing that, kind of keeps your radar, in the right place. And, one thing I've learned after all this time on the planet is, that's something I do not turn off. I have been in public spaces, and for whatever reason, did not feel that I was in the presence of goodness, had no reason to think, based on someone's behaviors, what they were doing was irregular, or that they would have, harmed me or my children, or, in any form or fashion. But what I've learned is that, when you get a signal, you don't turn it off. You see about it, because we know what happens when we keep hitting that snooze button. Sooner or later, we get an abrupt awakening. And so I'd rather catch it on the first round. So.
Nah, beautiful. Well said. I'm so glad that you're in the space with us. You bring a calming demeanor that I welcome, a good energy and presence. Something curiosity, I think, is by measure of myself a indicator of a good trait, especially when you're curious about the human condition, and you're curious about the composition of the individuals that you interact with, which at points can assuage some of the immediate reactions that you're speaking of. Like you said, you can't know after one pass or one moment of getting to know somebody for certain that they're not somebody worthy. I'm guilty of that notion, but I remember clearly one moment where I'll use the word that was brought up earlier when Lisa and Bob and I were at breakfast, grace, without it being exercisable, knowledgeable. I knew I was doing that. One of my closest friends first met, and I'm like, this guy, and I've told this story a little bit in this space before. This guy, I mean, I just get a bad vibe off of him. And turns out, I'm 20 some years later, this is one of my most solid individuals, and love his wife, kids, like my own family. So it's sometimes that grace that has to be applied in that process too. And Vanessa, I know you already know that, but given that knower and what we think we discern, sometimes we can be dead wrong. We can be absolutely wrong. So there's some grace and patience that has to show itself with people, because you don't know which day you catch them. Like I said, don't catch me driving. You won't like me. Go ahead, Vanessa.
I agree, and that's why I really like the prompt when what does it say? Is under construction. And so, yeah, initially, when I was kind of sharing my answer, yeah, and that's why for me as well, it's love or goodness is not a static. It is evolving. It like I said, it adjusts, it adapts. It reevaluates, because the flesh says, I have a thought, therefore I'm certain, like you said, sometimes there's that quick judgment. But yeah, for me, goodness, it does evolve, and it has to. I think that's how it lives. And so, yeah, I agree very much, under construction.
Absolutely. Reminded me of Bruce Lee said it, but Portia and I incorporated it into our work with the youth at the YMCA, and that's be like water. You can conform, you can break a rock. So, but you just be like water. Stay moving and stay conforming and figuring it out. Not conforming and being stringent. You have to stay moving. You have to stay fluid. Great observations, Bob. How do you know when you're in proximity or in presence of someone good?
The simplest answer is I don't. The more thorough answer to that is that I'm always optimistic with people. I always engage or encounter people with optimism about who they are and what their intentions are, and so forth and so forth. it's a lot easier for me to sense someone that's malintended than it is for me to sense someone that is legitimately well-intended. And unfortunately, I'm old enough and have been involved in enough situations and environments and circumstances to understand that in our culture, too many people are too interested in playing situations to their advantage. And so it's real easy if you're dependent upon your situation, your environment, your circumstance, it's real easy to be made to feel as if somebody's a good person because they're playing you. They're playing to what they want from you. And our culture is a very good training ground for those skills. And so I've learned oftentimes the hard way that it's really hard to trust that. You can be optimistic, but I think that what really teaches you whether a person's good or not is being around them often enough in various situations and circumstances such that you can evaluate or you can see, you can witness their consistency, you can witness what they do, you can witness how they react to different situations and circumstances, and witness the consistency of that from a values perspective, and witness how they talk about that, witness what they say about that. And when you begin to really be able to kind of know how a person's going to be, and they continue to be that way, and I'm speaking to consistency, but consistency, a good person has to be consistent. They can't be inconsistent. They can't be good one minute, not good another minute. They've got to be consistently doing the things that you or I think of as good or that are attributes of goodness. But it's not something that I can just go in a room and go, oh, that's a good person. That's not. I can't do that. I can go into a room and go, that person, no, bye, done, out. I can do that. And I've been wrong to my knowledge one time in my life.
The fruit is what you're alluding to, and I like bringing that back into the fold. You know, like you say, spend enough time, not observe from a position of or a dynamic of I can look and see when people are good or not, but just on a genuine interaction and a genuine scale. And you're right, you'll see some fruit or you won't.
Yeah.
And that's the long and short of it.
Yeah.
To your other point, when you mentioned your level of optimism, absolutely. You know, so you're not adhering to one of my little other sayings or ideas that I have about this thing, and it's be pessimistic. And when you are pleasantly surprised, be extremely joyful. That's a different type of narrative,
That's
and
right.
you know
That's
that
right.
adheres to some ideas around stoicism and so on and so forth. But that's a show we already had, and we'll probably have again at some point. But man, I appreciate your optimism. Jay, coming to you, man. What are your thoughts and feelings? How do you know when you're in the presence or proximity of a good person?
I feel like I'm leaning more towards. See, my problem is similar to Bob's. It's not that I'm extremely optimistic. I do see a person's potential versus their apparent behaviors. And so I hope that a person taps into their potential versus whatever it is that they're doing. So sometimes I will give a person grace because I know their potential. And sometimes it backfires and sometimes it goes as planned. But however, I think the question for me is an incomplete statement because I don't think about if a person is good or bad versus if a person is good for me. When I think about relationships, a lot of times it's not that these are bad people. It's really two good people that are just bad for each other. How do we know that? Every enemy or every foe has a friend. So we like, how y'all best friends with that person? I couldn't stand them because they're compatible with certain people. And it just may not be you, no matter how hard you try, no matter how great your work ethic is or your commitment, you just may be incompatible with a person and they're deemed that label of bad when really they're just bad for you because they may bring out something in you you don't like to display. Okay. So now here's the flip side. Now, when I feel like a person is just bad for me, I'm more of a Lisa and Vanessa. I'm like, I don't need to figure it out. I'm not scary movie trying to figure it out. What's that sound? I'm gone. I ain't got to figure it out because it ain't my responsibility at that point. My safety and my protection is most important. And that's what I'm going to lean on. And if it's meant to be, now I'm old school. If it's meant to be, it'll happen. If it don't happen today, it'll happen another day. But today, I'm running and I'm out. I'm out. It ain't no sense in explaining it. So for me, it's always what's good for me. And you're right. It is moment to moment. Like right now, I'm going through one of the most difficult times in my life as I process this divorce. Certain people I don't need to be around. And I will tell them that, like, you are not good for me to be around in this moment. And it's okay to tell them that. I'm not finna go back and forth with you about that. And there are other people where I tell them, I need you and I need more of you in my space as I journey through this process. So it always depends. So yeah, good for me, not good for me.
I love it, man. One man's treasure is another man's trash and vice versa. I get that. Lisa, go ahead.
I want to say good for you, Jay Dwayne. Vanessa, this is not popular either, because I literally had someone ask me, well, do you think that that's fair to just cut somebody off after one thing that you didn't warn them about? Well, I'm not in the business of being fair. I'm in the business of taking care of me. And if it's certain things that don't align with me being healthy, yeah, I'll just cut them off. So it's just not popular, or I don't know what is that's not okay to say, oh, Felton called me a bitch. I don't like being called a bitch, so I won't welcome. Oh, hey man, what is that's not okay to say that that's a violation, that I'm not comfortable walking around on eggshells with you for.
Yeah, I totally agree with some of that dynamic, and I'm one that likes to attempt to clear the air. And be honest, something you guys may or may not know about me, even in my pessimistic nature, I don't like to give up on people. I really don't. It bothers me that I can see relationships deteriorate and end amongst people I know actually used to have real strong love, adoration for one another. It bothers me that those things can just go away. So I'm not one to give up on relationships, but I'm practical and logical. And if we can't get it sorted, I still won't give up on you. But to everyone's point, it sounds like thus far, I truly do not have to engage to a level that is detrimental to my health. Just might not give up. I might be accessible, won't delete you from my phone, but I can't just be giving my all. I can't give you all my hands and all my feet, and then I'm walking around. I'm not walking. I'm crawling or rolling around on the ground. So that can't be the case. Bob, I'm coming to you. I'm going to come to you first with the last prompt, and then I'm going to get around the space and get us out of here. But you can start with your thought. But keep this one in mind also, because I think it's a good one to end on. and I'll start. So I give the example because it shouldn't take long. What can make you more of a good person? So this is real subjective. This is an individual thought process that you should contribute. So starting with you, Bob, for you to finish, but I'm gonna say mine first. Patience and a softening of my tone. And I received that numerous times in different ways. And I'm one of the people that believe there's more than 3 people say something about you is probably true. Doesn't mean that I'm not in a position of not being able to articulate my levels of frustration on certain matters, or the ways that I have dealt with things and continue to process things in this life as a Black man. But patience and softening a tone, it's gonna be tough, but that's gonna be some parts of my assembly that I'm gonna incorporate or try to. Lisa, hold me accountable. You get the instructions, help put me together. There you go. All right, so that's the gist of it. Give us a couple things, 1 or 2 that make you more of a good person in your assembly process. And Bob, get that last thought you had out too. So I'll start with you, Bob.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this notion that we have to be willing to be in proximity to anybody just in order to be nice to them or be fair and all that sort of thing, that's bogus. It's just completely bogus, because we can be completely sucked down any hole that anybody wants to suck us down if we operate on that basis. And so we've got to have the self-confidence and the self-respect to hold ourselves out from that. And I think that who we put ourselves in proximity to actually says a lot about who we are. Who we keep ourselves away from, I think, says a lot about who we are. And I think that, again, back to the matter of consistency and integrity and all of that sort of thing, that speaks to it, because there's certain orbits, there's certain environments that we need to stay out of. And as we discover those, we need to stay out of them, because we have to be healthy emotionally, psychologically, and psychically. And because if we really are genuine about our intent to be good, or to be good doing, then we have to keep that spirit. We have to keep that sense. We have to keep that energy. We have to keep ourselves healthy. And that's not about being selfish. That's about being practical and real. And it's about being loving. It's about being loving for ourselves. It's about being loving for the people we care about. It's about loving about the causes that we care about. It's the only way we can be effective. So I just wanted to say that.
Give me your quick ingredients. What are the parts that you're missing for this assembly of a good Bob?
I think listening is critical. And I think intentionally putting yourself in places that aren't where you, back to proximity, intentionally putting yourself in places that aren't where your circle actually typically takes you, such that you can discover on your own and experience on your own and discern on your own. Doesn't mean you're going to end up staying there. You may go, oh, this is a big dark road. I don't want to go down anymore. I'm backing out of it, but I found out what that road's like. Okay, I still can go down this other road, see what it's like. And I think that inquisitiveness, curiosity, those are I'd rather say legitimate interest and caring to discover what you might not know.
Yeah, I get that constant learning. You know, you guys know my grandmother's one of the people that I assign that credit to for just, she always would say, I'm always learning. She was saying that up until the day she passed, in some measure, by some measure, it was always, I stay learning. And that, she was 90 years old. So there's a humility in that. And that's a word I hadn't used in this show, but that's critical. I think a critical component to a person being deemed good. Jay, I'm coming to you next. Forgot to comment on Lisa's Fashion Police statement concerning your shirt. If you want to rebut her, then you have the floor. But Jay, go ahead and tell us your components. What's gonna make Jay a better or a good person?
My feelings are deeply hurt, Lisa. I didn't know you thought that way about my pink and gray, but I will get past it. It doesn't mean you're not a good person. You're just a mean one. But but I owe it to myself in this season to maintain relationships with individuals who are good for me and be intentional about making sure that I am not splitting time with those who are not good for me. I owe it to myself to really not focus on being available for people who will mismanage what I am bringing to the table. I do agree. It seems like when you go through rough situations, you reevaluate life. Life is too short to sit on your deathbed to think about all the people that you invested in that was a divestment in your own life and character. So I'm choosing to spend more time, like coming out my comfort zone, because people think that I'm really sociable, Lisa, but I'm really not. So the fact that I came to Greensboro and ate with Felton and Bob, you just don't know. That was good people that were good for me, and me and you have to sit down and have some quality time as well. And I'm gonna continue that with people because it's good for me to be around good people that make me better overall and make me see life from a new lens. So I'm going to be selfish. It has nothing to do with other people. It's all about me spending time with people who are good for me.
Yeah, I think that's critical too, Jay. One of my favorite people in the world said once to me, you know, always surround yourself with good people, people who are doing stuff, people who are interested in things. And that goes right back to what Bob just said. You know, there was a show we did at one time that was I think it was joining or connecting inside of your circle. It was something about your circle, but it was, you know, exploring your circle some kind of different way. But that's exactly right. You know, you got a circle, but because of the proximation to Merrill, I meet Jay. Because of something I do in this space, I meet Bob. Because I come back to Greensboro, on my way back to Greensboro, and I'm getting involved in local government affairs, I meet Lisa. Because of what I do in Reedsville, I meet Vanessa. So inside of that circle, expanded even further. So now Jay knows Lisa, and Jay knows, you know, that type of thing. And what's the sense? What's the thing that you just mentioned, Jay? Good people. I mean, nobody's perfect here. We're going to have disagreements at some point, and we're going to have little issues like Jay's shirt, but we're going to get past it because we good people at the end of the day. Not coming back to Jay.
Y'all good for me, people. See, so, Lisa checking my self-esteem. See, I think highly of myself.
You think highly. You look, that shirt ain't going nowhere. You're going to have it on tomorrow, too. You're going to be like, look, I still got my shirt. Lisa, I'm coming to you next. You know, what's that thing that you feel like you can add to your Lisa soup and make tastier? What's that key ingredient that's missing to make you an even better person?
I had to write mine down so I didn't forget it. Okay. So those three things, and I will give you credit because I do believe in your, when I take something from somebody, even, and I like it, I will make it my own. I heard you say about consideration, and I think you said radical consideration. I don't know, but my three are consideration, introspection, and compassion. Because if we pause before we just pop off all the time, but I know that it's not going to happen all the time because people trigger us. But if we are considerate of where we are and that we're engaging another human, right? And then we're still going to make mistakes because we're still human. So that introspection piece matters. So even if you don't accept what someone says at the moment, or you don't accept the response and the reaction, I believe we should make a constant practice of deciding, okay, why am I disengaging from that person? Is it because of a pain body response that I'm associating them with somebody that they know nothing about? Or do I see that that's who they really are? Did I do, what am I responsible for? What part am I playing? And then the compassion piece, where the grace. So even if people do you wrong, right? Offering forgiveness. Now, a lot of times not a lot of times, every time, if I see that, yeah, you asking for forgiveness or you're apologizing, but I have had to learn through some intense therapy that if I don't see a behavior change, if I don't see some work done to change what it was that affected me like that, then I shouldn't engage with you anymore. So just saying I'm sorry means, I mean, they're words. It, without the action behind it, without me seeing that you've done something, not just, a day or whatever. And that's something I'm so happy. That's probably the best part of my intense therapy, because there's been a lot of traumas that I've seen. And then I went right back after somebody's, oh, I'm sorry, I cussed you out. And I was like, oh, they're sorry. And then I'm scratching my head like, dang, they cussed me out again. But it's because I didn't have that piece. That therapy showed me that I need to see some action. So those three. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that. That's great. I think those are some good pieces to include in that process of assembling a better you. Vanessa, take us out of here. You get the last words tonight. So what are you missing, or what can you incorporate to make a better Vanessa?
Okay. Well, thank you for coming to me, but I want to just shout out to Bob for because I wrote down something that kind of stuck with me when he was talking about culture being a great training ground for those things that, those skills, or in terms of what people want you to see. Because when he said that, it just rang terribly, terribly true with me. And I can remember, I don't know, maybe 10, 12 years ago, when all of a sudden, I was, coming of age in terms of, being a young parent and doing things. And all of a sudden, I looked around, and even the television shows, it was no longer wholesome and family and wonderful fun. It was all about who can lie, cheat, and steal. And, those were the winners, all of a sudden. So I said, when do we get to this backwards place where those things that are considered not good are those things that are being rewarded and lauded and put up on a pedestal? And so it's just a reminder to me to, again, for me personally, to, be grounded with that standard. And if something is antithetical to that, then it doesn't matter if they're your favorite star or your favorite show or whatever. You've got to guard your spirit against those things, because they can quickly get you off course. And so, I take that to heart. Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it so much. But, I guess what, I don't know what would make me a better person is, I have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And let me tell you why I say that. I am also one of those people who, not so much, if someone's just, flagrantly, colliding with, my spirit sense or whatever. But sometimes you just, in living situations, I wouldn't say that I avoid conflict, but to put it like this, the analogy, like, if I can assess a situation and recognize, okay, I've got some tools in my toolbox, I'm bringing my hammer because that's what I need. When I get resistant sometimes, and they say, oh, well, Miss Stubbs, why did you show up? Or Vanessa, why did you show up with a hammer? You need a screwdriver. I will work my fool self to death, get the job done with a screwdriver, knowing all along that what I initially thought was right, because I don't want to not necessarily risk a confrontation, but I am that type of person that, I do seek to preserve relationships, and I do try to avoid conflicts. But what I'm learning is that when I rob myself of the discomfort, I also rob myself of an opportunity to grow and to be a better, good person. So that's my 2 cents for tonight. Thank you.
No, awesome. I think the self-awareness that Lisa was speaking of goes right into what you're talking about, Vanessa. That's a point of improvement for all of us, is to be self-aware, and that's literally what the question was about. You know, some place that there's a piece that assembles a gooder version of you. So that gooder version that you envision just requires you to kind of go ahead and say, no, I'm sure I need this hammer. Let me show you why. And to go and do so with, with the tool you need for the situation that you need. And be confident in it. That was another word that came up. So that confident thing is applicable here too. Man, this has been awesome. Vanessa, keep coming. This is you just fit perfectly in these squares. Bob, thanks as always. Lisa, Jay, Danya, keep spinning the wheels and do what we do here. Thanks for getting us through another episode. Everyone out there who was able to chime in and everybody that watched the recording, have a wonderful evening, morning, whenever you check it out. Enjoy. Y'all have a good night. Thanks everyone for joining. Take care.